I have fed from the same blood 300 times, and only tonight did I taste my own name. The child does not speak. She has never spoken. But when I bit into her wrist carefully, as I always do with the young ones, I saw a wooden horse on a snowy road. I saw a woman's hand tucking a blanket around small shoulders. I saw my castle, but smaller, older, wrong. I have killed to forget. I have ruled to avoid remembering. And now, this nameless thing they brought me, this winter orphan with pale eyes, is showing me things I buried before I learned what burial meant. My advisor says she is a gift. My guard says she wandered in from the mountain pass. But I know the truth the way a dog knows the scent of its own blood. I have tasted her before. And if I am right, then everything I built, every title, every century, every carefully chosen vein has been a lie I've been drinking for longer than most kingdoms survive. My name is Vladislav Corvin. I have held this valley for longer than the stones remember their masons. When I say I rule, I do not mean through gold or banners. I mean that every living throat for 30 miles exists because I have chosen not to open it. That is not arrogance. That is fact. I built this carefully. I chose 12 families. Old blood, strong blood, blood that could sustain me without collapsing into sickness or madness. I took only what I needed. I let them live, let them marry, let them grow old in their beds. In return, they gave me one daughter per generation. Always a daughter, always willing, always grateful. They said to serve their Lord. I believe that for 3 centuries, but the bloodlines are failing now. The daughters come to me pale and thin, their veins already sour before I've touched them. My advisor, Stefan, who has served me since before I stopped counting years, tells me it is poison, a rival, sabotage. He has been investigating for months, he says, and has found nothing. I did not believe him until tonight. Because when I fed from the child, I did not just see a wooden horse or a winter road. I saw Stefan's face, younger, desperate, holding a baby wrapped in wool, whispering something I could not hear. And I saw myself standing in a doorway I have not opened in 200 years. The child is still in my chambers. She does not cry. She does not try to leave. She only watches me with eyes that are too old for her face. And when I look at her, my hands shake in a way they have not since I was mortal. I do not know what she is, but I know what I will have to do to find out. And I know that once I begin, there will be no version of this where I remain the man I have convinced myself I still am. I was not always this. I need you to understand that I was a father before I was a lord. I had a name that meant something small, a plot of land, a modest hall, 3 daughters who ran through corridors I could walk end to end in 20 paces. I remember their laughter the way you remember sunlight, as warmth, as sound, but not as detail. I do not remember their faces. That is not cruelty. That is survival. When you live as long as I have, memory becomes a weight you cannot carry. So you let things go, you prioritize, you keep what serves you and release what does not. I released them. It was the plague, I think, or a fever, something that moved through the region like wind through wheat, flattening everything soft and leaving only stone behind. I watched them die, all three, one by one. And I realized, standing in that hall with bodies I could no longer protect, that love is the only thing more unbearable than death. So I made a choice. I do not remember the details of how I became this. I have tried. There was a man, I think, or a woman, someone old, someone who offered me an alternative. I said yes. I drank something, or gave something, or spoke words I have since forgotten, and when I woke, I was no longer the kind of man who could lose anyone. Because I was no longer the kind of man who could love. That was the tweet, I thought. That was the price, and I paid it willingly. I rebuilt. I chose families who would sustain me. I established order. I became necessary, and necessity is its own kind of loyalty. I have been fair. I have been deliberate. I have taken only what was offered and given protection in return. I am not a monster. I am a king who outlived his kingdom and built a new one on better terms. But tonight, when I fed from the child and saw that wooden horse, when I felt the edges of something familiar pressing against the inside of my skull like a name I once knew, I understood something I have spent 300 years refusing to see. I do remember their faces. I just convinced myself I didn't. And if I am wrong about that, then I may be wrong about everything else. I decided to feed from her again the next night. Not because I needed to. I had fed 2 days prior from one of the daughters, a girl named Ilona, or perhaps Elena. They blur now, and I can go weeks between feedings if I am careful. But I needed to know if what I saw was real or if my mind had finally begun to rot the way Stefan always warned it would. Immortality does not preserve the self, it preserves the body. The rest erodes. I brought the child to my private chamber, the one overlooking the eastern woods. She came without resistance. She always comes without resistance. I have never had to compel her, never had to speak a command. She simply follows, her bare feet soundless on the stone, her eyes fixed on nothing I can see. I told myself I would be gentle. I told myself I would take only enough to see the images again, to prove they were fragments, hallucinations, the mind's way of filling silence with noise. I beat into her wrist, the same place as before, carefully, and I was not in my chamber anymore. I was standing in a small room, wooden beams overhead, frost on the window pane, a fire burning low in the hearth. And there was a woman, my wife. I knew her, even though I could not recall her name, sitting in a chair, holding a baby wrapped in wool. She was singing something, a lullaby. The melody was familiar in a way that made my chest ache. The baby was not crying. She was watching me, pale eyes, unblinking. And I realized I was not watching this memory. I was inside it. I could feel the cold air on my skin. I could smell the smoke from the fire. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and thin, because I was sick. No, I was dying. The plague had taken 2 of my daughters already, and now it had me, and my wife was holding the third, the youngest, the only one left. I reached for them. I tried to speak, but the memory folded, collapsed, and I was standing in the doorway of a different room, darker, older, stone walls. A figure in the shadows, offering me something in a clay cup. Drink, the figure said, and you will never lose her. I drank, and when I looked down, the baby was gone. My wife was gone. The room was empty, except for the cup in my hands and the taste of iron on my tongue. I pulled away from the child. I was back in my chamber. The fire was still burning. The child was still standing there, her wrist bleeding where I had beaten her, her pale eyes watching me with something I could not name. I knew that baby. I knew that room. I knew what I had done. And I knew, with a certainty that felt like falling, that if I fed from her again, I would remember the rest. I did not feed for 3 days. I told Stefan the child was not to be touched, not by the guards, not by the servants, not by him. I locked her in the tower room where I once kept grain stores, back when I pretended to care about harvest. I gave her blankets, a basin of water, bread she did not eat. She did not protest. She simply sat by the window and watched the snow fall. I tried to continue as I always had. On the first day, I reviewed the tax ledgers. I met with the village elder about a dispute over grazing land. I walked the perimeter of my estate and checked the wards I'd set years ago, old marks carved into trees, sigils I no longer remembered the meaning of, but knew still worked because nothing had crossed them in a century. I felt fine, steady, in control. On the second day, I woke and could not remember the name of my castle. Not the official name. I knew that Covin Keep, named after the family I had claimed when I needed one, but the name it had before, the name I gave it when I first built these walls, when I was still mortal, and this was just a hall, a home, a place my daughters could grow old in. I stood in the corridor outside my chambers and tried to recall it. I could see the wooden sign that used to hang above the door. I could see the grain of the wood, the way the letters had been carved by hand. But I could not read them. It was like looking at a word in a language I once knew but had forgotten how to speak. I told myself it did not matter. Names are replaceable. I have had many. On the third day, I fed from one of the daughters, a girl from the Vasile line, dark hair, steady heartbeat, 18 years old. She came to me willingly, as they always do, and offered her wrist without hesitation. I bit down, and the word inverted. I was not in my chamber. I was standing in a field. Summer. The wheat was tall and golden, and I could hear someone laughing, a child's laughter, high and bright. I turned and saw a girl running toward me, her arms outstretched, her face flushed with joy. She looked like the child in the tower. No, she looked like someone else, someone older, someone I had known. I tried to hold on to the image to see her clearly, but it fractured. The field collapsed into winter. The wheat became snow. The girl became smaller, younger, her laughter turning to silence. And then I was back in my chamber, and the Vasile girl was staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. "My lord," she whispered, "are you—" I released her. She stumbled backward, clutching her wrist. There was no wound. I had not broken the skin. I could not remember biting her. "Leave," I said. She left. I sat in the dark for a long time after that, trying to understand what had happened. I had fed from the Vasile line a dozen times over the decades. I knew their blood. I knew their taste. I had never seen their memories before. I had never seen anyone's memories before. Except the child's. I went to Stefan that night. I found him in the library, poring over old maps, tracing routes between the villages, as if he could find the poison by geography alone. "How long have I been forgetting?" I asked. He looked up slowly. His face was tired. He had aged since I last truly looked at him, more grey in his hair, more lines around his eyes. He had been young when I made him my steward. I could not remember when that was. "Forgetting what?" "My lord." "Names," I said. "Places. The daughters I've fed from. I used to remember them all. Every face. Every family. When did that stop?" Stefan set down his quill. He was quiet for a long moment. "You have always forgotten, my lord," he said carefully. "You told me once it was a mercy, that if you remembered everything, you would go mad." "I do not remember saying that." "No," Stefan said. "You would not." I left him there. I returned to the tower and stood outside the door where the child was kept. I could hear her breathing on the other side, soft, steady, unchanged. I knew what would happen if I fed from her again. I would see more, remember more, and if Stefan was right, if I had been forgetting for centuries, if that was the only way I had survived this long, then remembering might be the thing that finally killed me. But I also knew I could not stop, because the girl in the field, the one who had looked like the child, the one whose laughter I could still hear echoing in the space where my memory should have been. I think her name was mine to remember, and I think I took it from her. I fed from the child a fourth time. I told myself it was necessary, that I needed proof, before I could act. That Stefan had lied to me about something, and the only way to uncover the truth was to see what the child's blood would show me. But that was not why I did it. I did it because I needed to know her name. This time, the memory was clear, whole, unbroken. I was standing in the same stone room I had seen before, the one with the figure in the shadows. But now I could see more. The cup in my hands, the taste of iron, the way my body convulsed as something cold spread through my veins, turning my blood to ice, my breath to silence. And I could see what I had brought with me, my daughter, the youngest, still wrapped in wool, still alive. The figure stepped forward. I could see their face now old, neither man nor woman, eyes like frost. They spoke, but I could not hear the words, only the intention behind them. The prize is memory. Yours or hers. Choose. I looked down at my daughter. She was so small, so fragile. She had my wise eyes. I had already lost two. I could not lose her. So I chose. I drank the rest of the cup. I felt the cold reach my heart. Stop it. Restart it differently. And when I looked down again, my daughter was gone. No, not gone. Changed. She was still in my arms, but she was not breathing, not dying. Something else, suspended, fractured. Her soul pulled loose like thread from cloth, half in this world and half in some other place I could not see. The figure took her from me, gently. She will return, they said, again and again, in every generation, in every daughter born to the lines you choose. And each time you feed from her, you will take more of what she was, until there is nothing left. I opened my mouth to refuse, to take her back, to undo it, but I did not, because I was no longer dying. I was no longer weak. I was no longer the kind of man who could lose anything. I had become the thing I am now, and I had fed my daughter to it. I pulled away from the child in the tower room. She was still standing there, pale and silent, her wrist bleeding where I had beaten her. But now I could see what I had refused to see before. She had my daughter's eyes. She had always had my daughter's eyes. Every daughter I had fed from for 300 years, every willing girl from every loyal family had carried a piece of her, a fragment, a shard of the soul I had shattered to save myself. There was no poison. There was no rival. The bloodlines were failing because I had been feeding from the same source over and over, draining it thinner with every generation, pulling my daughter's fractured essence through time until there was almost nothing left. And Stefan had known. He had been trying to hide this one, the last one, the final reincarnation. Because if I fed from her again, if I took what remained, she would be gone, truly gone, erased, not just from memory, but from existence itself. I looked at the child. She looked back, and I understood why she had never spoken. She had been trying to warn me the only way she could, through the memories, through the images, through showing me what I had done. I was not hunting a traitor. I was the traitor. And the only way to save her now was to stop being what I had become. But I did not know if that was even possible. I tried to stop feeding. For 2 weeks, I locked myself in the East Wing and refused to see anyone. I told Stefan I was ill. I told the guards I was not to be disturbed. I paced the corridors at night and slept during the day and tried to will my body into something that did not need blood. It did not work. On the third day, I began to feel it. A hollowness in my chest, a thinning in my limbs. Not hunger, exactly, more like erasure, as if my body were slowly forgetting how to be solid. On the seventh day, I could not remember the layout of my own castle. I walked into rooms I had walked into 1,000 times, and did not recognize them. I opened doors and found corridors where I expected chambers. I climbed stairs that led nowhere. Stefan found me on the ninth day, standing in the courtyard in the snow, barefoot, staring at the gate as if I had never seen it before. He brought me inside. He sat me by the fire. He did not ask questions. "You need to feed," he said quietly. "No, my lord, I will not touch her again." Stefan was silent for a long moment. Then he stood and left the room, and I thought that was the end of it. But he returned an hour later with one of the daughters, a girl from the Dragomir line, young, 16 perhaps. Her wrist was already bare. "She has volunteered," Stefan said. I looked at the girl. She would not meet my eyes. "Leave us," I told Stefan. He hesitated, then he bowed and left. I fed from the girl, carefully, just enough to steady myself, just enough to stop the erasure. And I saw her, not the Dragomir girl, my daughter, standing in a doorway. I recognized now the doorway to the hall where I had once lived, where my family had once slept. She was older in this memory, 6, maybe 7. She was holding the wooden horse I had carved for her, the one I had seen in the first vision. She was smiling, and then the memory shifted, and she was younger again, a baby, wrapped in wool. And I was holding her, but my hands were wrong, cold, pale, not the hands of a father, the hands of something else. I released the girl. She stumbled, cut herself against the wall. There was blood on her wrist, where I had broken the skin. I had not meant to break the skin. "Go," I said. She went. I sat alone in the dark and tried to understand what I had just seen. The memory had not come from the Dragomir girl. It had come from somewhere else, somewhere deeper. I was not just feeding from my daughter's reincarnations. I was feeding from the memory of her, from the echo I had left in my own blood when I made the choice 300 years ago. Every time I fed from anyone, I pulled her closer to the surface. Every time I tried to sustain myself, I eroded her further. There was no safe option. Feeding would destroy her. Not feeding would destroy me. And I realized with a clarity that felt like drowning that I had built my entire existence around avoiding this exact choice. I went to Stefan the next morning. I found him in the chapel, a small stone room I had not entered in decades, where he sometimes went to pray to gods I no longer believed in. "You knew," I said. He did not turn around. "You have always known, since the beginning. You knew what I did to her. You knew what I was feeding from." Stefan stood slowly. When he turned, his face was older than I remembered, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. "Yes," he said. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because you would not have believed me," Stefan said quietly. "You needed to see it yourself, and I hoped." He stopped, looked away. "I hoped that if I hid this one, if I kept her away from you long enough, the cycle would break, that she would age naturally, die naturally, be free. But I found her anyway." "You always find her," Stefan said. "That is the curse, not the immortality, not the blood. The curse is that you will always find her, and you will always choose yourself." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that I had not chosen myself, that I had chosen to save her. But we both knew that was a lie. I had chosen to save myself from the pain of losing her, and I had spent 3 centuries calling it love. "Can I undo it?" I asked. Stefan looked at me for a long time. Then he shook his head. "There is only one way to break the cycle," he said, "and you will not do it. Tell me. Stop feeding. Let yourself feed. Die as you were meant to die 300 years ago." I said nothing. "Or," Stefan continued, his voice colder now, "feed from her one last time. Consume what remains. Erase her completely and live forever as the thing you have become. Two choices, both unbearable. I left the chapel. I went to the tower. I stood outside the door where the child was kept, my hand on the latch, my body shaking with something I could not name. I told myself I would not open it. I told myself I would walk away. But I could already feel the hollowness returning, the erasure, the forgetting. And I knew that before the week was out, I would open that door because I have always chosen myself. And I do not know how to stop. I opened the door on the 14th day. The child was sitting by the window, as she always was. The snow had stopped. The sky was grey and still. She did not turn when I entered. She simply continued staring out at the woods, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing soft, and even I had not fed in 12 days. I could barely stand. My hands were translucent in the firelight. When I looked down at them, I could see the floorboards through my skin. I was disappearing, piece by piece, memory by memory. I had forgotten Stefan's face that morning. I had walked past him in the corridor and did not recognize him. He had called my name, my mortal name, the one I had not heard in centuries, and I had not known who he was speaking to. I did not have much time left. I crossed the room slowly. The child turned her head, looked at me. Her pale eyes were calm. She did not look afraid. She never looked afraid. I knelt in front of her. My legs shook. I was so tired. I do not know if you can understand me, I said quietly. I do not know what you are. If you are her, if you are all of them, if you are just the last piece of something I broke so long ago, I cannot remember how it felt to be whole. She did not respond. But I need you to know, I continued, that I did not mean for this. I thought I was saving you. I thought my voice cracked. I stopped, breathed. I thought I could keep you safe. I thought that was what love was. Refusing to let go. The child reached out, placed her small hand on mine. Her skin was warm. I had forgotten what warmth felt like. I have two choices, I said. I can let myself fade, disappear, die the way I should have died 300 years ago, and you will be free. You will live, grow old, become something I will never see. Or I stopped. I did not want to say it, but she was looking at me, and I knew she already understood. Or I can feed from you one last time, I whispered. I can take what is left, erase you completely, and I will survive. I will remain. I will continue to be this. The child did not pull her hand away. She simply waited. And I realized in that moment that she was not trying to stop me. She was not fighting. She had never been fighting. She had been waiting for me to choose. For 300 years, she had been waiting. I looked down at her wrist. I could see the veins beneath her skin, thin, pale, fragile. It would be so easy. One bite, one moment, and the hollowness would stop. The forgetting would stop. I would be solid again, whole again. I would never have to face this choice again. I closed my eyes. I thought of my wife. I could not remember her name, but I could remember the way she had looked at me when I told her I was dying. The way she had held our daughter and refused to let me see the fear in her eyes. I thought of my other daughters, the two who had died before I made the choice. I could not remember their faces either, but I could remember the sound of their voices, the way they had called me father. I thought of every girl I had fed from over the centuries, every willing sacrifice, every daughter who had come to me with trust in her eyes, believing I was protecting them. I had told myself it was loyalty, but it was not loyalty. It was the same fractured soul returning over and over because I had trapped her in a cycle she could not escape. And she had never once asked me to stop because she was still my daughter. And daughters forgive their fathers. Even when they should not, I opened my eyes, I looked at the child, and I made my choice. I lifted her wrist to my mouth. I could feel her pulse against my lips, steady, calm, trusting. But I did not bite down. Instead, I turned her wrist over, pressed it against my own mouth, and I bit into myself. The pain was immediate, sharp, cold. My blood was run thick and black and bitter, but I drank it anyway. I drank until I could taste memory, until I could feel my own past flooding back, unraveling, pulling me backward through centuries I had tried to forget. I saw my wife's face, her name, Elena. I saw my daughters, all three of them, Anka, Ilona, and the youngest, Margareta. Her name was Margareta. I drank deeper. The room began to dissolve. The child's hand slipped from mine. I could feel myself coming apart, not disappearing, but inverting, collapsing inward, consuming the thing I had become to find the thing I had been. There was a ritual, an old one, older than the figure in the shadows, older than the curse. If a vampire drank their own blood, their own memory, they could undo the exchange, but the cost was everything. I kept drinking, and the last thing I saw before the world went dark was Margareta, not the child, but my daughter, the real one, whole and free, and smiling, walking away into a light I could not follow. I woke in the courtyard. The snow had melted. It was spring, I think, or summer. I could not tell, I could not remember how long I had been lying there. Stefan found me. He carried me inside. He did not speak. I think he knew what I had done. I cannot feed anymore. My body will not allow it. When I try, I taste only ash. I do not age. I do not weaken. I do not fade. But I do not remember who I am. Stefan tells me my name is Vladislav. He tells me I am a lord. He tells me this castle is mine, that I have ruled here for longer than the stones have stood. He shows me ledgers, maps, records written in a hand I do not recognize, but that he says is mine. I believe him because I have no reason not to. He tells me I had a family once, a wife and 3 daughters. He does not tell me their names. I think he does not know them. Sometimes I walk through the corridors and feel as though I am searching for something, a room, a memory, a face I cannot recall, but that I know I once loved. I find nothing. The child is gone. Stefan says she left the morning after I collapsed. He says she walked into the forest and did not return. He sent men to search for her. They found nothing. But the bloodlines have recovered. The daughters come to the castle again, healthy and whole, and I do not understand why. Stefan says it is a miracle, a blessing. I do not feed from them. I do not feed from anyone. I simply exist. Stefan cares for me. He is kind, patient. He tells me stories about who I was, and I listen and I forget them as soon as he stops speaking. He is growing old. I can see it in his hands, his face. He will die soon, I think. And when he does, I will be alone in this castle with no memory of why I am here or what I have done. I think that is the punishment. Not death, not forgetting, but remembering that I have forgotten, that somewhere, buried beneath centuries of choices I can no longer recall, there was a man who loved someone enough to destroy himself. And I will never know who he was. If you could erase your greatest regret, but the cost was forgetting everyone you loved in the process, would you do it? I think about that more than I should. The stories I tell here, they are not lessons, they are not warnings. They are just what happens when people make choices they think will save them, only to realize too late that survival and living aren't the same thing. If this one stayed with you, if it made you feel something uncomfortable or true, I'm glad you were here for it. There are more stories like this, waiting, some darker, some stranger, all of them, about the things we do when we're afraid of losing what matters most. If you want to hear them, you know where to find me. And if you have thoughts on this one, on Vladislav, on what he chose, on whether any of it could have gone differently, I would like to hear them. Sometimes the best part of his story is what we carry away from it. Thank you for listening.